I give a decision. I don't want to lose time up to you, up to a certain point. What should we do? The first option, but it's not necessary because I have two texts which did not yet appear, which cover the same topic. And what I can do is tonight already. Now I will be such a terrible snob. You know, I will have 1 hour before I go to dinner with Rafe Fiennes and so on. So in this bit, I'm impossible. I know. So in this time,
I'll let her know. You want
she
Elia
left.
No, she's coming back, but
Yeah,
you
but
want
she
Elia
left.
to email, yeah.
Yeah, because I will email to her these two texts. So,
There she is.
I'm sorry. You left the room, Elia. You left the room. I was already spreading bad rumors about it that you left. So, you know what I wanted to do to you, but I didn't. But I feel obliged to tell you my dream because I didn't yet practice it. But maybe you heard it. It's my dream. Once, but you threatened to do this to me. To ask a friend to call me here, and then in the middle of the talk, class, my phone would start ring, and I would tell you, please wait a minute, and would calmly talk with him for some 5-10 minutes about that the point, totally vulgar things. You know how, oh, do we go to that movie theater, but there is no good restaurant at its side, total vulgarities, and then, like, I will not do it, so I put it on silence. So the choice is this one. What if, since I hope that after yesterday's warning, most of you know the text, what if I somehow resume better than I did yesterday what is bothering, torturing, haunting all of us, our global and specific situation now, and then you react to this, not only to this, but also maybe to my text, to what we were saying yesterday, and then you or me, one of us will probably detect the body language, maybe no. Then if you want, I can return to my to what I prepared. But don't be afraid to miss anything because again, in whatever case you will get it. Okay, so what are my general premises? First, sorry, you want to say some stupid introductory stuff?
I don't have to.
Sorry?
No, I don't need to.
Yeah, but now I will be the worst male chauvinist. Male chauvinist. Women are so sensitive and fragile. So
no,
I don't want to hurt you if you.
No.
Okay. Incidentally, is it serious? What is happening now in Greece?
What is happening in Greece?
Aren't there some student demonstrations?
There's always.
But this is not new Syriza. It's controlled by those in power. Yeah, sorry. Okay, let's go on. So first, a very general statement. People, that's the usual reproach of some leftists to me, that I don't agree with it, but I see their point, that all your particular positions are moving more and more to the right. So in what sense are you then a communist at all? Okay, you know my paradoxical answer. I consider myself a moderately conservative communist. Why moderately conservative? Would you agree with this judgment or not? The lesson of Syriza and other things, and here I disagree with, otherwise I respect him tremendously, my good friend Badiou, is that, as I've written a couple of times, I don't buy, I despise this attitude of Isn't it wonderful when on a big square, 1 million of the people protest and so on, this ecstatic feeling of unity? My answer is fuck off. What interests me is what happens the day after. By the day after, I mean usually 2, 3 months when the ecstatic moment is over. How do I don't mean this term in disrespectful, patronizing way, but simply the majority of, sorry for the term, it's obscene, ordinary people. How was their actual life affected? Do they still see a perspective? Is it even worse than it was before? I think that the cases are not lost. For example, I already mentioned it here. I was in contact, still am, with Alvaro Garcia Linera, Morales' vice president. I think that till that coup d'etat against them, they, Moralista, they did a wonder in Bolivia. They really, really, without any illusions, raised the standard of the, again, sorry for the expression, ordinary people as much as possible. It did grow up. At the same time, they did it in such an intelligent mixture of pressure and compromise that they prevented total boycott of the rich, of the capital. You know, they taxed them more, but it functioned. The problem is not their defeat. A miracle happened. You remember when there was a coup d'etat against them and an old right-wing lady took over and brought some big fat old version of the Bible to the parliament. Like now we are becoming again a Christian nation. Then this new regime called elections and Moralistas won again. It went okay. The problem is, and it's a serious problem, I don't see a simple solution. Natural resources, mines. Among other things, Bolivia is extra rich in lithium. No, lithium is now a curse in many countries. Now, it's very easy to come from a more developed Western country and say, oh, this will ruin environment and so on. It is true, but not totally true. If you are ready to renounce part of the profit, you can do it in a relatively ecologically safe way. But the tragedy is that this led to a split between Lucio Arce, who was economy minister who ran the economy under Morales before, who is now president, and Morales himself. Morales withdrew into illegal struggling, there are armed conflicts and so on. So it's a tragedy. Even that model, sorry, didn't work. But what I want to say is that in this sense, I am a conservative communist. Why communist? In all naivety, and I wonder if any of you has an argument. If you, with a very naive view, forget about social complexities and so on, ask yourself the obvious question: what appears to be wrong with our world today? You have obviously ecological crisis, you have obviously the problem of artificial intelligence. I'm not saying artificial intelligence that it will be necessarily bad, but it is changing our world more radically than you think. And there are wars and social unrest, the growing gap between rich and poor, and so on. The problem I see here is that, do you see any other? And it's incredible how many people, although they would never use the term communism, agree with me here. It's a very commonsensical view. Look at ecology. Isn't it clear that only a global action, collaboration, coordination has a chance to do something. If we don't cooperate, we are lost. Then we, the developed West, will be doing ecological struggle will mean for us to export problems to poor third world countries or whatever. So, or artificial intelligence. Again, you cannot, you can put in one country all the limitations, but you know, you have tax havens, you have big corporations who do their research uncontrollably. And so, again, it's only a global cooperation. As my friend, I'm boasting a little bit because I'm proud to be in contact with him. I didn't know that he is such a leftist privately. Carlo Rovelli. If you, as I began, read him, he is the best popularizer of quantum mechanics. But then I did my usual Stalinist test. I asked people around him, is he just a popularizer or does he at the same time do the real stuff? All, even those who do not agree with me, told him, no, he does the real stuff, you know. So as he wrote me in a letter, there will have to be at some point, if we want to survive, a global confederacy. The only choice is, will it happen before or after a global nuclear war? That's his view. No. So again, maybe I'm dogmatic here, but that's my first premise. Communism is not this type of a surplus, you know, like, oh, in developed countries, we are not doing so bad. I often get this question from some Norwegians. I understand them because Norway is, if I get it correctly, the only surviving and more or less, there are limits also there, fully functioning welfare state. So they say, why, for us, why shouldn't we maintain the way our state functions? My answer is that, yes, we can take something from Norway. I'm otherwise not mystifying Scandinavian countries, you know, but they have something. Why did they survive so well? No, not just they didn't that after 2008, but the general crisis, it was basically from when communism disappears, 1890s, no? You know what they did? This is the spirit that we miss. Maybe the leftists who told me exaggerate a little bit, but I ask around, it's allegedly true. They still maintain a kind of a precisely spirit of global social cooperation. They saw hard times coming. So what they did is something very naive. They brought together trade unions, banks, big capitalists, sorry, and the state, and so on, ecologists, and they reached a compromise. Okay, maybe we sacrifice a little bit of this, but and not that. And they reached a compromise, and the compromise worked. It works. That's almost unique in today's times. So what I'm saying is that that's my first premise. By moderately conservative, I mean whenever you enact a radical measure, and we will have to do it. That's why I call it warlike communism. That when I say I'm a communist, I say war communist, you know, not that type of what people usually associated with communism. I'm sorry, I will repeat a joke, maybe you know it. I love it. From old, no, I didn't tell it this time here, from old period, 1970s Brezhnev era, where there is a big poster in Moscow, in 20, 30 years, we will reach full communism. And a guy there starts to jump out of joy. And people ask him, why are you doing this? He said, I have a mortal cancer. I will not be alive at that time. So I'm not talking about that communism. But I learned something so interesting. Yeah, because people tell me, listen, we are too poor for socialist democracy and so on. I now read, even Lenin is not clear. Lenin and some people around him, and I did something that usually liberals like to do, but they don't want to talk about one crucial thing. When did the real harsh Stalinism emerged with strong secret police and so on that we all ironically know and love? You know when? It's explicitly clear. Not in the worst of war communism, when the civil war was going on, but in 1922, when the party decided, Lenin just won, many people were against, on NEP, new economic policy, which allows a certain degree of privatization, land to individual peasants, small factories, and so on. And Lenin explicitly wrote that this is a dangerous moment because Lenin was quite intelligent. He was afraid that de facto a new class of moderately rich, but nonetheless rich people will emerge, and spontaneously, that's part of the class logic, spontaneously they will look for some ideology. At that time, that's very interesting, in 22, after 5 years almost of communist rule, in all those worst times, do you know that at some point Bolsheviks held 1/8, the 1/8 part of like less than 20%, 15% of the Russian territory. But universities were still relatively free in the bourgeois sense. There were many big professors who were criticizing the regime. Isn't this wonderful? Because liberals usually think, oh, this will be a liberal era, new economic policy, more economic freedom, and at the same time opening. No, the reaction of those in power was, now that we are creating a new middle class, we should be very attentive and prevent this new middle class to become aware of itself in a properly ideological anti-communist terms. That's why, at the same time that economic situation instantly grew much better, all of a sudden, even hunger was over, Soviet Union, or what is called, I don't know when it was exporting food, the situation was much better. At that point, they organized so-called, it's wonderful episode, philosophers' steamers, they were called. The best known is one with many big names, theologists, sociologists, who were most of them leftists, but not Bolshevik leftists. They put them on that steamer with that family, and it was not that police came in the middle of the night. These were still pre-Stalinist times. You were informed and so on. And they took them to Germany, not of any because of some Nazi contact, but because Germany at that point was the only Western power which made diplomatic relations with, renewed them with Soviet Union. But again, the idea was nonetheless a slightly darker one. It was, as Lenin put it clearly in some texts, it was not for what they did that they were thrown out. It was for what they maybe will do, they might do in the near future. You know, they wanted no position so that new class, fully self-conscious class, will not emerge. It was nonetheless at the same time done with in a way unthinkable under Stalinism. For example, the much feared person, but a person who is for me almost an ideal, Dzerzhinsky, the founder of Cheka, later KGB. He was an incredible person. I read a biography of him. He was very moderate. He was all the time pressuring Lenin. Listen, that guy is in prison for a year. He is not bad. We should let him out and so on. And Lenin's answer was usually, no, 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 are you crazy? This guy is dangerous. But what I want to say is that this is what I still admire in Lenin. In spite of his brutality of political acts, the moment he perceived that the guy is not really dangerous, he changed his position. For example, was it Rishkov or who? I don't know. There was an old Menshevik historian who opposed Bolsheviks, and Lenin insisted to put him on the list, like the list of those to be deported. Then he learned from secret police that this guy in some shitty town there in Ural, old and ill, very ill, no longer active. You know what was Lenin's reaction? Okay, now, if he is not dangerous of us, then this totally changes the situation. He intervened that because these were times of civil war, of rationing still, that his food ration was redoubled and so on. Or look at the greatest anti-Leninist, I'm sorry for bothering you this, Yulian Martov. He was the leader of Mensheviks. Very honest man, just didn't agree with the Leninist project. Lenin learned in 23 that Martov is dying very poor, not enough money, in some Swiss small apartment, didn't even have money for doctors. And Lenin raised the issue of whatever they call it, Politburo, the center of our sessions, let's send him some money. And Stalin blocked it, of course, no, well, spend money on it. But what I want to say is that nonetheless, you got my paradox. That's crucial, that the situation was much more open in war communism. Oppression began precisely with new economic politics. And maybe this will resonate with you because do you agree some of my friends from China claim that this fast growth of capitalism was not in contradiction with Tiananmen repression, but its consequence, a reaction to it. Like, let's not play with democracy, let's open up to whatever you call it. It's a big debate, what type of but let's open to capitalism. But for that very reason, we need a stronger state control. So we have to take into account all these paradoxes. That's my first point. And I would like you very much to your reaction to this, like, convince me, please, that I'm wrong. I know it's a pessimist view, but the tragedy is that in contrast to classical Marxist stance, which still has this, how should I call it, teleological necessity built into it. Like there is something perceived as, under quotation marks, normal progress of history. Capitalism is disintegrating, opening up the path for socialist revolution. Now, in the last years, as I forgot his name, a German leftist economist wrote a wonderful book where he says, yes, capitalism is disintegrating, but it's just disintegrating. It's not that there is some organized left waiting. No, the one who is waiting to take over are maybe even worse than capitalism we were used to. So this is why I will not repeat it, you know it, if you know a little bit of my work. This brings me to my second point, obsession with quantum mechanics. My whole idea is this quantum notion of collapse. You know, you have so-called superpositions. When something happens, it's always accompanied by a series of other possibilities. And I think that here, quantum physics comes close to Hegelian dialectics. As I put it, it's an old joke. I know you know it, but I will give now a new accent to it. To determine what a thing is, you should always put it in the context of its superpositions. What it might happen, but didn't, and so on. You know the joke, this one, I didn't use it here, maybe I did yesterday, but I would say it comes close to 40, 50 times. I used it here. You know that eternal joke from Ninochka, you know, coffee without cream, please, and the waiter answers, sorry, we have no cream, only milk, so I can only give you coffee without milk. It's not a nonsense. It's a very Hegelian definition that coffee without cream is not the same, although materially it's the same as plain coffee, but it's not simply plain coffee. It's a coffee into the identity of which, in our symbolic social universe, negation is implied. And I had once, I'm sorry if I repeat myself for some of you, years ago, a nice debate with Judith Butler, where on some marginal points at least, and this was one, we agreed, you know, where she said that uh, in this sense, what is not a thing is part of its identity. Where she agreed, and even suggested to me, is that the same goes for feminism. It's my eternal example. You had a more traditional pre-modern feminism, which still accepts, even if they don't call it subordination of women, this idea that there is a proper role for women. It doesn't necessarily mean just homework. It can mean also some, under quotation marks, lower intellectual functions. Like, it's so nice to observe this in communist countries, although they were nominally for women's rights, and there always were some women ministers in the government, but strictly limited, with one or two exceptions, to, you can guess to what? To these not crucial cultural ministries: health, education, culture. You know, that's for women, not secret police, not economy, and so on. You know, my idea was always, my God, I would like to have a really tough woman, like my ideal, forget about Antigone, Medea. You know what she did to her children? She is the true woman for me. You know, what with you? You're not for Medea.
Doing Jared Miller say about
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because she very wisely opposed Medea to woman who is woman only as a mother. No, Medea is for him a living proof that a woman cannot be reduced to procreation. But
It's still an extreme example.
yeah, it is. I agree. That's why I'm not saying that all women should act like Medea. Just that Medea should be at the head of top of secret police. Okay, so let's go on. You know, this is what Judith suggested to me, that you can, like, women complain of what rights they are deprived of. But the development of feminism means that even if women's A real situation doesn't change, but it does change gradually, hopefully towards the better. The problem is what women experience as what they are deprived of. In the early pre-modern, before Mary Wollstonecraft, feminism, if you cannot even call it feminism, it was more like, uh, 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 we should be given a proper chance. Fathers, husbands should not beat us. We should be given free, blah, blah, blah. So they wanted to play their patriarchal role, but in slightly better conditions. Then, so there, uh, their woman without milk was just a woman too much terrorized. They just wanted to be woman still within the family in a suburb. Then the revolution comes when they started to encroach into public sphere. Like this was a big moment in the French Revolution, where only with Jacobins. There was a moment when they oscillated. Should they allow, even my beloved great Jacobins, should they allow women to have public functions? And just before this, there was some local battle against counter-revolution where women participated. And then, of course, some representatives of women said in Assemblée Nationale, we were good enough to fight there, but, and this won the argument. It's with Napoleon that we return to under feminism. So you see, before you change the reality of women, you must redefine, if you compare them, sorry for this tasteless comparison, to coffee. Coffee without what? First is just coffee without milk. We want a little bit of better life, the husband shouldn't beat it. Then you go on. We are coffee without voting, human rights. We are coffee without a bank account. Do you know that in England or some Western countries, I don't know, even was it when did women gain this is incredibly how late this happens. I didn't know. When did women gain the right to have a fully autonomous bank account? Sorry? Yeah, it's incredible how late. Yes, if you were married, the husband had to have the right to prohibit you access to your own bank account and so on and so on. So you see, and Judith said this very nicely. She even added something which nicely surprised me, because sometimes she can be this boring, politically correct bitch who I don't know now. But she said something very nicely. She said that the most disgusting form of oppression of women in our era, where we all pretend equal rights, is this type of oppression where you treat women formally as equal, like, no, I'm not a master, treat me as equal, you share jokes and so on. But, but at the everyday level of practices, you still expect her to act properly as a woman. Like Judith invented this example. Like, let's say we are together, no? And but you're not so stupid, you're already active bitch. And let's say that you would protest, and we would concede that we treat each other as equal. No, I'm Slavoj, I'm not professor, senator, what stupid joke I used this. But then at a certain point, I said, oh my God, I'm thirsty. Would you please bring me some coffee and so on? Like, these small details of material practice. So another horrible thing that I will tell you here to provoke you. You know who are TERFs, no? Trans-exclusionary radical feminists. I got my point. I don't agree with them, basically. But would you agree or not, or is it too much for you? But at one point I do. Namely, when they emphasize that being a woman in our society is not just this superficial mark. You dress as a woman, you put lipstick and so on. What would annoy me if I were to be an actual biological woman would be a man who, sorry for the obscenity of my expression now, who even didn't have the decency to have his penis cut off or balls, just who would have thought, oh, it makes me feel nice if I put lipstick on and so on, and demand to be treated as a woman. Isn't this is a marginal aspect of TERFs. I am basically against them. But nonetheless, where they think just about vulgar things like, they're not vulgar, but ordinary, common, sorry, like giving birth, menstruation, having period, and all that. These are material practices which mark their daily life for women. And here I even respect some soft fascists. For example, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you know who was the first in the world to give women 2 days, if they were employed, of free holiday when they have period? Evita Peron in 51. One must say this. They did it. Although I think that Peron was generally bad. It was a form of fascism. But they did it. So again, let's go on so that I don't get lost. My idea is that we have this superposition of options, and it's not clear today. We cannot count on some deeper historical necessity, like even non-deterministic Marxists like to say, if we don't screw it up, there will be socialism. And they concede, we may screw it up and so on. But no, it's really open. I would even say, following Benjamin, who said that, our duty today is to pull the emergency brake on the train of history, not to make it go on faster. I even think that if left to itself, history moves to a new form of maybe soft fascism or neo-feudalism, of however we call it. Only our voluntary action can prevent this. What I mean by this, now let me be very precise, the last theoretical detour, is not that everything is contingent, but the motive that I repeat all the time. In a contingent way, one of these possibilities will establish it as a winning one. And then the whole history will be perceived as necessary leading to this contingency. Now, if you permit me 2-3 minutes of, let's nonetheless play serious philosophy of Hegel. Hegel is not as very intelligent readers like my two good friends. I got their new substantial text, Rebecca Comey, and she makes me angry, which means I really appreciate her. You know why? Because it's hard for me as an old male chauvinist to admit this, but in the last 40, 50 years, almost all great books on Hegel were written by women. I'm sorry. It first, Gillian Rose, Hegel Contra Sociology, then it was, sorry? Catherine Malabo, but between the two is Beatrice Longanès, yes, and others, Rebecca Comey, then there is this Rocio Zambrana from Puerto Rico, who now teaches all around the United States, and Rebecca Comey, and she and Frank Ruda, who is now the victim of this new Stalinist perch in the Western academia, is, as already mentioned here, I think this is not a joke. He lost his job at Dundee University. It was even the BBC News, not him, but the radical reduction, done typically by Labour, worse than conservatives. So you know what's my joke here? Double joke. I know I used it here, but I love it. It's so obscene. that in United Kingdom, you no longer have a left, some margin. You have one big ruling moderate right party, it's called Labour Party, and then you have some crazy, even more rightist party. Now comes, don't be mad at me, it will sound racist, but I don't mean it. How do you then distinguish between moderate centrist right and radical right? Where in radical right, you find more women and Indians and other. And if you want moderate right, you get white men mostly. Okay, with honorable exception of your, how do you call it, the guy who does the budget, Rachel something. Yeah, but nonetheless, don't underestimate this phenomena. You know, this rediscovery of women's and other races in the extreme right. Don't say, oh, they are just cheating, this is a trick. Sorry, it's more than a trick. But let's go on. So my point is that whichever version will win, it will change not only the future, but the past also. I refer here to my eternally quoted line from T.S. Eliot, who said that a really new work of art rewrites, changes the entire past. And I always remember him. Do you know why? When you walk here towards Russell Square, bypassing SOAS, you know that the first building on the left was Faber and Faber, where now they moved somewhere else, where Eliot was working. He did his great work there around the corner. Okay, so what I'm saying is that it's crucial to see, and Hegel knew this. You have a Hegelian passage from a deadlock, a critical situation, then something new emerges and resolves the crisis. Usual interpreters of Hegel read this as Hegel's great limitation. There are no radical cuts in Hegel. In Hegel, everything flows logically from one category to the other. No, I think Hegel's logic and is much more delicate if you read him closely. You have an antagonism, a tension. Then something new emerges and the passage appears logical, but only retroactively. There is always in so-called dialectical synthesis an act of contingency, of cut. Yes, there is continuity, but retroactive continuity. I don't have time. I'm losing too much. But so just to conclude, so here I have a problem also with regard to the text against me, and I appreciate it. I mean, critical text. You know, where I, as already mentioned yesterday, would like to hear more from you. Again, as I've written a couple of times, I'm afraid of the intellectual laziness of the left. What do I mean by this? Obviously, something horrible is happening today with Trump and others. No? Not just with Trump. And the easiest way is to say, oh, it's horrible. So what's the most horrible thing that we remember? Fascism, Nazism, so it must be fascism. Maybe it is, but tell me more. In what precise way? It's not just, it's literally a liberal fascism. We can debate this, but just to conclude, back to China. It was you, I think, who mentioned yesterday this opposition between takeover and what was the other point? Assimilation. Yes. Here things get complex for me. I will again repeat a crucial insight for me from Fred Jameson. Of it happened. China Chinese history much earlier in 13th century, and when they were open, when they were occupied or whatever by Mongols, no? Wasn't this an example of assimilation, but not of the occupied to the occupier? That's what almost the other way around, which was good for the China. Yes, they occupied China, but gradually they assimilated more. They didn't ruin Chinese culture. You know who told me this? Correct me if I'm wrong. I spoke with a Chinese friend, and he told me something wonderful. Maybe it was a myth. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I liked what I heard. It's that in China, even today, if you want to say some street in a big city is safe, you use an expression like it's as if it's controlled by the Mongols or whatever. You know, it's a myth, probably. I know how many are here. I know that, for example, all Western intellectuals, me included, quoted that phrase allegedly from China, that the greatest curse is, may you live in interesting times, which all my Chinese friends, maybe you can correct me, are telling me, never heard of this. This is Western invention on China. So what I'm saying is that, you know, what often can happen is that it's not just assimilation versus takeover. What I would be afraid is that maybe even Deng Xiaoping and others, they thought it's just a takeover. But gradually it turns into assimilation. You know, what I'm saying here, what my enemy, and this should now bring me back more to what you said yesterday, my enemy here is the notion of alternate modernities. Fred Jameson, whom I follow here, and as already said here, or didn't I? When I don't know when I was here, he was really my good friend. You know why? I wrote that text, which was fitting. I just went into my PC and said Fred Jameson, and just pull out all the fragments on him, you know, and wrote a very popular text. But how he died, I was contacting him the last days. You know, in France, I've written this in my text, they have this wonderful expression, a series of jokes called Monsieur de la, about Monsieur de la Police, a name, a complete idiot who takes things literally. And you have a whole series of these totally flat wisdoms, which are in some sense true, but they are stupid. Like the best known is 1 minute before he died, Monsieur La Police was still alive. Of course, you know. My favorite is, do you have the same expression in English? In Slovene, we have it. If you are too self-enclosed, no? Somebody tells you, go around and do you use this expression? We do, and Germans do, I think. Go around and throw your eyes around a little bit. Because, you know, this Monsieur La Police is alone, can get a woman, and mother tells him, go to the town fair there and throw your eyes around a little bit. You will find some woman to approach. And then he comes in the evening back home sad. Mother said, what was wrong? He said, well, I did as you told me. I went to a butcher. I bought some pigs and cows' eyes, and I went there and was throwing them around and nothing, you know. Okay, Fred Jameson was my Monsieur de la Police of the first joke. You know that he behaved as if, okay, I had a heart attack, blah, blah, but let's go on as if nothing happened. His family told me one day he was already in hospital. The last message, a couple of hours before he died, his message was, I need tomorrow, he already had his PC there, these books, that manuscript, and so on. He literally behaved as if, like, one day before Fred Jameson died, he was still alive. It was absolutely incredible, you know. And so in his critique of alternate modernity, he made a nice point that this was a popular third world, or not just third world in the sense of undeveloped part, but non-Western liberal dream that we can do our own non-capitalist modernity. The idea was, again, what I was improvising yesterday about Van Kuning. We can do our own dynamic development, but avoiding capitalist antagonisms, no, and be even more efficient in this way. Fred Jameson says that no, these attempts are ultimately attempts to have capitalism without its antagonisms. It's basic, and he was right. When the last time I met him, we talked about this. He agreed with me when I said, sorry guys, in Europe, we already tried alternate modernity in 20th century. It was called fascism. Fascism, the best definition of fascism is it's an alternate modernity. So in this sense, although you do something new, it's not liberal capitalism. The way we know it, you think you are taking it over, but the capitalist logic determines you. You know, you think you are the boss, but the logic determines you. I'm sorry if I did my usual. Didn't I say 5-10 minutes that I will just? No, okay. That's my contribution with Derrida once. We were not totally personal enemies. I used this because I was speaking too long and he looked at me angrily and I said, listen, I'm following your line. I'm fighting against the linear metaphysical notion of time. You know, like in my time, 5 minutes, it's 1 hour. No, that's life. So please, I can go on, but I would really like you now to counter attack in whatever sense you want. I can go on if it doesn't work. I don't want to be the one who chooses.
Go on.
No, not me. There.
Elia is there.
Yeah.
So you want to go to questions now? Is that what you say?
Yeah, because I think there were so many interesting things together. That we dealt with. Is he not here? For example, the most profound Marxist insights into the link between chocolates and pedophilia in Belgium and so on. Is the guy here? No. Ah, you are here. Yeah. Sorry? You didn't? Because I know why. But you did the right. You have a chocolate for him. Yeah. No, because maybe the mistake was like, I'm not a child, but your head would scare children off, you know. Now you have better chances. Sorry, would that he want? Yeah. I listen.
But so yeah, it's the left potentially appropriating rootedness.
Appropriating
rootedness. Rootedness.
Yeah, roots. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know for global cooperation. So, but how to how to resolve this being citizen of the world or being citizen of a particular place? Yeah, that's one question. Yeah.
Okay, look, very brief answer because I don't want to repeat the mistake of you and of my yesterday and long. You know what's my hope here? And that's the point of that text. The enemy is for me, more and more the worst of European tradition that survives today, the idea of a strong nation state. And that's what makes me sad about India, Turkey, and so on. With all their critique of Eurocentrism and so on, they are practicing precisely the worst thing from European legacy. You know what Modi is doing? Strong nation state, which means pressure on Muslims and so on. Erdogan, now that it's horrible. There is a historic chance that Kurds offered to dissolve their, whatever was PKK, a resistance organization. No, Erdogan's answer is almost the same. And Putin, when Ukraine said, okay, take everything you want. No, Erdogan wants more. And maybe I'm wrong. You should answer. But sometimes I get the impression that even China has some tendencies towards a stronger Han-dominated state. You should tell me, how do you look upon this? I am afraid here to be the victim of Western filtered media. What is in your eye, the real actual situation with what we read in the Western media, which is Tibet and Uyghurs there in that Muslim part. Is there oppression? Is there I know what China has done. I know that pro-Chinese arguments, which are true, that, for example, with all the oppression and so on, but you know, when communists took over in 49 or when, the average age of, how do you call it, survival, when an average person dies, was, I think, around 30, 31, 32. Now it's 55 in Tibet, you know. So, but it's a complex question. So again, with Ruth, you know what I like about European Union? That the stronger European Union, that's why all the right-wingers are against it now, not only did not strengthen local oppression, but open up the space for more. For example, I claim that in Spain, Basque country, and Catalonia, even here in the UK, although you are now out, Wales, Scotland, and so on, even in France, some part, all this was exactly opened by the fact that nations do not feel we are just our own. None of them is saying we want out of Europe, but just we have a larger unity Europe where we can afford, for this very reason, more local communal life. Maybe I'm a utopian here, but I have high religious, take this with irony, but it's true what I will tell you. I met a couple of times, and it's very strange how we have good personal relations. Rowan Williams, the only really intelligent archbishop. Now it's incredible how my guys at Bloomsbury told me he just delivered a manuscript, very leftist one, on solidarity today. Okay, so he immediately admits this. He's totally for Europe against Brexit. He says that precisely the idea of European unity as a global encompassing unity, guaranteeing certain basic rights, it's what gave a boost to them. It's not just Scotland and so on. He's very much in, how do you make a predicate, people who live in Wales are what? Welsh, okay, for the Welsh people. And he even gave me some wonderful indications, Rowan Williams. He told me, if you listen to people speaking Welsh, you will immediately notice something. If there is some here, you can confirm it or deny it, but I liked as a theory. His point was that those who speak Welsh lack really dirty words in their own language. So you don't understand anything, only every minute or so, fuck off, jerk yourself, or whatever. And I said, this is a wonderful example of multicultural cooperation and so on. So you see, that would be my answer. And it makes me infinitely sad that Belgium would have fitted into this ideally, because stronger Europe opens up a space for local differences, you know.
I never use a dirty word in Dutch.
But do you have them?
Have them, but the people who use them.
So which do you use?
English one.
English.
Yeah,
Here,
it's like
yeah, I always said when people English universal language, yes, at the level of dirty words, you know.
or in French, or I use in French.
Yeah, but
So
French
even
are
though I
not
learned it-
so good.
Yeah.
They don't know. No, the highest are two examples: Serbs, Serbia, and southern part of China. I was told. Is it true or not? That if you go inside from Hong Kong, they have but no, sorry, seriously. What I want to say is that because we Slovenes are totally crippled at this level, it's impossible in our language to translate even this big hard-boiled novelist like Raymond Chandler. He is not directly vulgar, but this tough language, it doesn't have an equivalent in Slovene, which is a cultural tragedy. But I'm losing time. Okay, let's go on. My God, please, please, please. Do we move to China, or there is a guy up there?
Yeah.
Fuck off, you, China.
We'll come back to you.
Back to you.
And obviously, Trump phenomenon. How does this change? Or are we just going to let the play itself out?
It's a very precise question, and I will not bluff. I am still perplexed by it. I hope we all agree that we shouldn't do with Trumpianism what people on the right and on the left like to do today with old fascism or Stalinism, to renormalize. People are telling me, don't react so nervously, coldly analyze it. In some sense, we have to retain this sense of shock. It's horrible what is happening. But my answer would have been that unfortunately it presents itself as counter-revolution, in the sense that revolution is LGBT plus, woke culture, whatever, but in its effects, it's incredibly revolutionary. And here, we don't have time to go in detail into it, but here I would even say it, I would even conditional, not totally agree with Varoufakis, that while we talk about changing capitalism or even overcoming it, they are doing it. If this tendency in the United States goes on, it will no longer be a liberal democratic state, not just at the level of politics. Who knows what is happening now or in a couple of hours? You get this madness, you know, Liberation Day with these tariffs. But I think it's deeper. You know, again, it's more complex, but definitely, as I said yesterday, figures like Elon Musk and so on, they are no longer old capitalists, even not the ultra rich, because on the other hand, we shouldn't underestimate the injustices in the old capitalism. For example, I read somewhere that take those from the end of the 19th century, this wave of mega rich people who were there. We all know that from Carnegie, all of them.
Oh, yeah.
We know.
Manufacturers.
Yeah. You know, if you adjust to inflation what they had, they were richer than Elon Musk. They were already almost a trillion. Again, if you inflation adjusted. Not to mention if you measure their position of wealth within the entire country. But nonetheless, so I think that unfortunately, okay, it all depends how you define revolution. But I'm tempted to say I'm not yet decided here. You know, it's too easy to say that, oh, but it's still old capitalism. It is capitalism, but it's not old capitalism. Something is so radically changing in the way the state functions, more and more direct control in the way capitalists working, while they are talking about the getting rid of the pressure of the state. You know, when Musk came on stage with that, how do you call it, chain to cut the wood, no? Taken from Milei, from the Argentinian guy, get rid of the state and so on and so on. Yes, but I hope you notice that if anything, the state is getting stronger than ever now in the United States. It's regulating practically everything and so on. So I think I cannot do now whole analysis, but I'm afraid of this secret satisfaction. It's still old capitalism. No, the way this new tendency mobilizes also a large part of the working class along the racist lines and so on, even I would say much more successfully than Nazism or fascism did. Because as we know today, I read some data, you know, it's not, of course, it's not true as Orthodox Marxists thought that Nazism was the direct rule of big banks and so on. But it was also not that the working class was opposed. If you look at the class basis, not in any deeper sense, but those who mostly supported Nazism, it was the middle classes, no? Who felt threatened by the economic crisis and so on. And the rich people even protested a lot. So what I'm saying again is that maybe we should redefine in a more precise way revolution, because it's not, of course, revolution in the sense of simply let's get out of capitalist mode of production, but capitalism will change nature so radically that, again, we are all searching for the term. But I think, again, it's too comfortable to say it's just a new phase of capitalism. That's what I think. But as you can see from the slightly elusive nature of my answer, I'm not sure. I see my limit.
Would you also say it's not like you wouldn't agree with Varoufakis and Jody Dean that it's a new form of feudalism?
Again, I see their point very clearly, but for me, you know where is the problem? For me, the whole point of feudalism is that you are also directly at the subjective level dominated. In feudalism, if you are, how do you call ordinary farmer, a serf? A serf. This is your symbolic position. You are a serf. You know your proper place. This is not how Trumpianism functions. A typical form of Trumpian economy will be this one. And you also find thoughts in this direction with Varoufakis. I think the ideal forum is this, how do you call it, not permanently employed, but...
Unemployable.
No. This, when you... Sorry? Precarious, yes. The idea, you know why is this, as I've written, sorry for boring you. Precarious work is, for me, an absolutely ideal forum of this new stage that we are entering. Why? Because its basic ideology is this one. First, it enables us, the system, hope not us, to rise above this clearly profiled class struggle. If you ask Microsoft or, for example, Airbnb or Uber, no? They say, wait a minute, we don't exploit you. We are not even capitalists. We just mediate between what you offer and your public customers. You are, that is a nice perversion. The idea is you own your own car. You are a small capitalist. And we just enable contact between you and your customers. We have nothing to do with traditional capitalism. Why is this so dangerous? Because it's a nice example, it's a crucial example of the mystification of freedom today. The ideology behind it is this one. You own your own means of production, and you are free to do with your money whatever you want. I think I used this example yesterday. Like you have $10,000, okay. You act like a small capitalist. You can say, I will take a holiday, I will invest in my son's education or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like it makes you much more free. That's the mythology. Second thing that I find absolutely ingenious, but it horrifies me, is that, let's say you work for Uber, or other examples are even clearer, you don't perceive the company as the enemy. They are just above, neutral. You perceive your class companions, other Uber drivers, as competitors. So it absolutely already in its form prevents any, sorry for this old-fashioned term, working class unity. First, there is by definition, so they claim, no working class, we all own mostly our means of production, no? And second point, we perceive others as working class, as our competitors. So this, I think, is something that simply doesn't fit some features that I wonder if you agree, perceive as crucial to the notion of feudalism. What feudalism means is nonetheless a basic, well-organized hierarchic order, where it's clearly defined how everybody is at his or their proper place, with very limited freedom. For example, even artisans, those who produce things, are usually organized into groups where they limit the number of how many of them can enter. And it's interesting how, if there is some Italian here, you may confirm it. When I was recently in Rome and complained how inefficient and expensive taxis are there, they told me yes, because it's organized literally in the old feudal way. There is a limited number of taxis. Taxi drivers are organized in, what's the term? I have it here. It's not a caste. It is, sorry? Guild, yeah. Kind of a guild. And you know what's the paradox? That if you are an old taxi driver and want to retire, you can sell your license to another. And I was told that the price can, not always, reach up to 300,000 euros, no? Just to get the title. This is feudal logic, but I don't think this is predominant. I think that at this level, Trumpianism is much more wild.
But if Elon Musk developed his neural link,
Then it's
it would dominate
first
the
he is
subjective
bluffing
level.
a lot, you
I
know.
hope so.
Yeah, I mean, my answer to his dreams to go on Mars, it's maybe that's a good idea. Try and disappear there, please.
There was one at the back.
Ah,
actually,
I'm
at the
sorry.
back
Yeah.
Earlier.
Sorry, on?
Early point.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation, to start with.
This means you're already sharpening your knife behind your back. Okay, use it.
The moderate right is for white men and the radical right is for women and Asians. And you said, don't discount the latter. It's more than a trick. And I wondered if you could elaborate on that point a bit more, because I found that quite intriguing.
It's it's more than one element here. One is that the tradition, the new radical right is very plastic in the sense that it's ready to make quite many compromises. For example, maybe I mentioned this. This was one of the secrets of Margaret Thatcher's success. Labour Party thought, okay, Indians, other race, subordinated, they will be ours. No, Margaret Thatcher read the statistics. We tell that already in her years, an average Indian family person was already slightly more wealthy than an average white British person. That's the one thing. It's no longer automatic. Second thing, it's not simply cheating in the sense that it's more, I think, not simply cheating, but a very effective ideological mechanism. No matter how subordinated a group is, you always have exceptions, people who succeeded. And it's very intelligent to pick them up, precisely because they are outsiders, they can do better the job than direct representatives of today's rich and so on. This trick was nicely described already by Marx when he explained how it was wise for the British state system in early modernity with the development of capitalism to keep, it's no longer true, but to keep political power in the hands of aristocracy. Because they claim if you give the power directly to capitalists, they have conflicting interests. They will get in trouble, while aristocracy doesn't work for their life. They are outside and they may be precisely a better manager of it. Now you will say this is aristocracy. No. In the years of welfare state, intelligent capitalists knew that precisely because directly conservative pro-capitalist parties are usually fighting other competitors, the best, to paraphrase Marx, the best representative of the general interest of capitalism can be social democracy. Of course, social democracy in this Western sense, and so on and so on. So what I'm saying is that, take somebody like, how do you pronounce it? I'm afraid to miss Kemi Baden.
Baden, who I was thinking because she was actually a student here.
Really?
Yes, I'm embarrassed to say she did law, although I never taught her. But yeah, she did law here about.
You should have told her.
I wish I had, but maybe she didn't.
No, but what I want to say is that precisely because she has this minimal social position of externality, and I'm not talking here about being something eccentric and so on. No, she is at a distance, and this may work better than to have one of the old stupid conservatives. There is something in this logic that it's better. Even, for example, correct me if I'm wrong, in China, it's totally different, but who unified China, the first emperor? Yeah, yeah, but where does he come from? Not the big provinces, from half desert, inside, outside a little bit, no? It's he who, unification has to come from the outside. And here I got in conflict with Van Hui and my friends because they all want to remain leftist Confucians. I follow Mao here. I think that, you know what he did? People say the first emperor of China was terrorist. Fuck you, look at the statistic. He was not, the only thing he did is that he liquidated many rich people. He applied the same law to all of them, but let's not lose time. So in this sense, it's important not to dismiss this as cheating. When Kemi Badenoch is on the top, this doesn't mean some secret ultra-conservative bureau or whatever at meeting picked her up to cheat and so on. No, this is a very good survival strategy. And again, it works a little bit like for what they call in the United States, I'm now jumping, it's not the same phenomenon, the corporate Me Too. You have a corporation which exploits workers like crazy and so on. Then some of the corporations are already doing it in a planned way. You look for one of your top guys who, I don't know, grab a secretary's ass or so on. I don't condone that. I'm not saying it's minimal. But then with all public pomp, you sacrifice him, and what? The same exploitation goes on, just you regain the mark of, So again, I would like just to finish, to link this with what I think I said yesterday, that it's not a problem today to have a leader like Kemi Badenoch and so on, because again, the system is no longer, at least not in the standard sense, patriarchal. Our leaders today are still dirty authorities, but they are not father figures. Be serious. Musk, Trump, if they are father figures, they are, I put this hypothesis at some point, Freud talks about, in his Totem and Taboo, about this primordial father, not yet killed by the sons who fucks all the women around, and then sons kill him, father returns as a symbolic authority, you have the rule of law. But Lacan makes here a very intelligent remarks, that what Freud thought it's a primordial father, it's something that comes after symbolic father. When the symbolic father's authority is in a crisis, you get obscene figures like Trump, and so on. So I think that there is an effective crisis in the structure of authority going on today. My friend Mladen Dolar, who also I must advise you to read his book on rumors, published another book. Is it in English? I even don't know. I know it in Slovene on authority, where if his starting point, it's a wonderful one. It's how, no matter how far you go, authority was always perceived as something already in crisis. You know, like for Plato, "Ooh, authority is in crisis," and so on. Always, so that authority is by definition authority in crisis. And following this line, or preceding it, Fred Jameson gave a wonderful reading of Antigone, where he said that what happens in Antigone, it's not a decay of the harmonious polis, but its constitution. Because what Antigone is, if you read it in a traditional way, is the story of a gap between, it's a very superficial reading, I disagree with it, between private family values and the state law. But this gap defines the state. Before this gap, you have primitive tribal society and so on, you know. So I don't even think that it would be interesting. Maybe you could help me here. How does a figure like Kemi Badenoch function? I don't think there are any, because if anything hold is that black people are not stupid. And I'm not saying this in any patronizing way. I mean it quite seriously. Like when I'm in United States and speak vulgar, you know who is always worried? White liberals. They say, but when you speak like this, how can you be sure that the black people who are here will not be hurt, and so on? And finally, a black friend of mine exploded in a meeting and said, sorry, do you think that we are so stupid that we need your protection? Your statement is racist because you treat us as naive, vulnerable people. When we will be hurt, be sure that we will. This is why also one guy totally missed my point. He was an honest critic of me, who, when I, with some tasteless examples, I know, mentioned the story which really happened. I had a wonderful obscene exchange with a black friend, not to embarrass him, I will not name him, but he is well known. And he said, embraced me and said, laughed, now you can call me a nigger. Sorry for pronouncing this name. Then, when I quoted this, a black critic, I appreciate him, but got it wrong when he said, oh, so do you really mean that you can be only really friends with blacks if you call them the N-word? No, I said, arrogantly maybe, read my theory. Of course, that guy didn't mean you could really call me N. He would be totally right if I were really to call him N. I don't know, to beat me up, to slap me, or whatever. This was a pure rhetorical offer to be rejected. It was just, its meaning was simply, we are really friends now. But, you know, in the same way that, sorry for extreme vulgarities, when in every day you said, I would like to strangle you now, to fuck you up, your, sorry for vulgarities, it's not meant literally. This is how everyday language works. You have these expressions, you know, which are function precisely by not being made to be taken literally, and the definition of an idiot is to make them, to take them literally. And I make, sorry to go on for so long, once, not here in New York, maybe you know the story, I'm sorry to repeat it, I was also an idiot. Maybe you know the story, I'm sorry, but I like it so much. A guy approached me, white, nothing, and said, Professor, I love your obscene jokes. Could you please write me a dedication to your book and sign it, but do it really obscene? I warned him. I told him, you are playing with the devil. I'm an idiot. I take things literally. If you mean obscene, you will get it obscene. He said, no, 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 as dirty as you want. Then he was hurt, of course, because you know what I wrote? In a dirty toilet with her feet in urine, I'm fucking up your ass, standing your mother, and so on. And then he was hurt. And I was so furious. I told him, I warned you 2 times. You are talking to a madman. You know, no, no, no. Fact. So, but you, so again, but would you agree also, you know, what interests me more than this, the problem for me is, again, the true problem of feminism for me is not symbolic posts occupied by women, but women, again, small humiliations, subordinations in everyday life. And how even apparent privileges of women can be incorporated into it. Like, this is part of the British mythology. You know, all those movies, How Green Was My Valley, where my miner's family, her husband, the sons, come home on, because they were paid weekly then, on Saturday, early afternoon. They come home and she has some cap, whatever, open, and they all throw the money in. The idea is, yeah, husband brings the money, but the wife determines how it will be. This is for me also false freedom of women. It's one, okay, it's better than nothing. It's better than what happens often in Slovenia. That's why we are, even now, that's why we are a country of alcoholics, literally. Over 10% of the people are clinically alcoholic. I'm clear here. I say, no, not for morality. I'm unnatural. I hate the taste of alcohol. I'm sorry, unnatural. But what I want to say is that where, no, husband doesn't do this and simply goes to the inn, drinks it, it's horrible. So I just want to complicate things and to warn you about the plasticity. Let me take another example. Did you see the movie? I didn't like it, but one detail is right. Baby Girl. Nicole Kidman getting into an affair with a young guy. You know, what I only, and get involved in it in a masochist relationship. She discovers the satisfaction in him, a much younger collaborator, although she is the CEO, top, humiliates her and so on. But then there is a wonderful, there are wonderful 5 seconds, 10 at the end, when after they resolve the tension, she organized that she is sent to, I don't know where, Hong Kong, Indonesia, and blah, blah, blah. The crisis is over. Then an old board member comes to her, to the office, and says, you got rid of your, I simplified the story, you got rid of him, but I heard you were doing strange things with him, implying masochist rituals. And then he says, listen, if you have any of these needs at any point, you can come to my place, and so on. And she gives a perfect answer here. She said, how dare you talk like this when I will like to be humiliated and beaten? I will organize it and pay for it. You know, it's absolutely correct answer. It's one of the few examples where I would have done the same if I were to be a masochist. I would prefer to pay somebody, because in this way you depersonalize it to some extent. Money also has. Sorry, I'm forgetting this talk. Yeah, China attacking. Okay. Please, finally, yeah. Where are we? Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah.
So I will give you an example of my archive research. There was requesting the State Archive Center of the most trivial ones on my asking them permission to look at some archive of the cultural version.
You. Oh my God, you got the permission.
No.
Yeah.
So the refusal was but the staff kindly saying that public revolution went thoroughly and successfully, as there is nothing left to gain.
Sorry, I didn't get the culture.
The great political success. So that's a bit though. That's really interesting. That really, really
They didn't. So they didn't put it into that 30% of. No. It's just it was a success. Yeah. Yeah.
It's very intricate and complex. So responding to your comments on Deng Xiaoping, so basically what Xiaoping said literally, and also we learned in the public school, is that if we are allowed, so basically pragmatism is summarized by him as whichever cat that catches mice is a good cat. So perhaps we should ask what is.
He didn't even say it doesn't matter if it's red or white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is good? But so look at what is happening at this very moment. I will give you some actual examples. So the state of China is now. So what it's doing is lessening the influence of their public approaching, either pedagogically or in the sense of control. Seeing many mega million key opinions leader online banned for their radical approach of playing the role of propagandist. So they are lessening the influence of ideology. So it's like we don't want to talk about it good or bad, nothing. We don't want.
Sorry to interrupt you, but let's go on. That's extremely interesting because I saw in many countries this today. It's no longer even that they want propaganda for official ideology. No, just, you know which country? I met some people from there is even further in this, so I heard. It's Vietnam. They simply, most universities there, I would say, they simply don't have philosophy department, sociology. You have art, something, and technology. But you know what I wanted, so that you will go on improvising along these lines. How do you see the role? Do the Western media, how do you call exaggerate it, or it's really something? I know I will pronounce it wrong. This let it rot, Bao Lan or what movement. The idea is that many young people have this idea: live modestly, just stay out of. First, First, is this a really massive phenomenon or something exaggerated?
And so, I mean, I could give you one example to maybe.
Yeah.
So, what I can see exactly fitting with what you named in terms of your psychoanalytic session 40 years ago, you said that you cannot stop talking just to prevent things from changing.
Yeah.
And in Tiananmen Square today, you are no longer allowed to take a walk during the night in the square. However, precisely, you are allowed to commute, cycling in bikes through the night Tiananmen Square with a mouse portrait hovering above the sky. So that's really interesting because that movement doesn't allow you to stop. So that I continue with, again, very fragmentally, again, according with your comment on the first emperor Qing. So what Qing did something that's really unique and incredible in China was unification of units. So it's described in the book called Future of Nostalgia by Svetlana Boyn, and he was talking about.
I know her. Yeah.
She's talking about how the unification of units really echoes with the American dream and how the progressiveness that you were talking about as well, the idea of progression. And I think what is interesting is how the idea of individual sense, which is my own reflective nostalgia that she was talking about, is really changing. So now I answer your question yesterday, which is what is the alternative? I think what is the alternative is really how it's less about the ideological aspect, which is really, really chaotic. And I think what is really interesting is how we can draw an alternative of individual or affective aspects to look at history, to look at what we had in the past, which is very different in terms of the Western and the Eastern. So maybe one more fragment to wrap up what I'm talking about. So the Korean German philosopher Han Byung-chul, Han Byung-chul, he wrote The Boredom of Society, those kind of books. But he wrote a book called Shanzhai, this deconstruction in China, and in that book he was really talking about the idea of a circular, relational, non-essentialist perspective in the Eastern culture. And that aspect is contradicting to what he argued, the idea of copyright in the Western society, like we have an identity. And I think what we are facing in terms of this kind of, again, I was talking about the intricacy of the Eastern-Western global economy, is this, again, like the haunting aspect of this kind of cultural residue, of that kind of a circular history motion, which is like the China before the British opened their gates. So that I think is my answer to.
No, but I would love, if I may, ask you something more here because I find it so interesting. First, I know you don't like the guy, but not Alex something, the Korean, South Korean, but he claims in his book, I forgot which one, that the very notion of Asia as a unity emerged from British and other, all of a sudden they become aware, wait a minute, we are Asia. It's paradoxically a result. And this is why, I hope you will agree with this, that this idea of inert Asia disturbed by Europe, it's totally a European projection. And here comes I know I'm not saying anything new, but here comes my horror. Everybody knows this, but it has to be emphasized today, of the Opium War, which is, for me, one of the mega crimes of history. I looked at some history books, blah, 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 and probably they were true. I discovered, before Opium War, China was not an empire in confusion, decline. It worked not per capita, but in global product. China in 1810 was 3 times stronger than United Kingdom. Whatever it was called, the British Empire, the symbol of Western success and so on. So again, it's not that you had a country in decline, which is then occupied, and then it's cruel, as Marx thought, brutal colonization, but nonetheless brings progress. China had very well organized, for example, through central power, distribution of food supplies, so that if there was hunger or drought in one part, food came from. This all collapsed. I mean, 19th century was an unimaginable catastrophe for China. The same goes for India and so on. No, so but so what I still don't get, if I may insist with you, both of you, this mega question for me. Okay, where do you see the alternative? Because you used yesterday the term capitalist creativity, not capitalist, but socialist creativity, so that we don't become too boring for the others. Could you explain what did you mean by this concretely?
Yeah, maybe some tendencies of the.
What do you mean by, sorry, I don't know, platform socialism?
Yeah, well, it's a new term.
I didn't know. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like in China, for example, like we're dealing a lot through regulations with the platforms. So I do.
I'm sorry, explain to us. What do you mean by platform?
Platforms like Amazon.
Yeah, no, not platforms in the sense of big programs, but platform. Yeah. Uber. Yeah. So you think that this works? delighted, if you will say this in an optimist way. You think that platforms like Uber are not just a bad aspect of feudal decadence of capitalism, that they can be function in a different way.
Yeah.
That is extremely important.
Yes, yes. I agree. Like,
how do you prevent feudalization? Are platforms publicly more controlled, or how?
It has to at the core. So I mean, like there are not even in China. There are in Italy the Bologna or
Bologna, the city. Yeah, yeah.
Very interesting thing, which they kind of are saying is kind of like a co-op valley instead of like Silicon Valley. It's kind of alternative system to mobilize, technological creativity through co-ops, which is more similar to sort of platform socialism.
No, I agree with it, and I can supplement you. Then I give you the word again. I know the same is happening with some big agricultural complexes, not the one north of Gibraltar, which is totally industrialized. This is capitalism at its worst. Every summer or when hundreds of thousands came as slaves from North Africa to make the fields. I mean, literally more than half of vegetables or whatever, salads, this disgusting stuff, it's too healthy for me, is produced there. But you know which that in central Spain, they have, and then a country that should be a surprise, you wouldn't expect it. Switzerland, which we thought is just, you know that go to a big Swiss city, they have two great chains of supermarkets. The strongest is Co-op. And it means what it says. It's a cooperation. The point is that capitalism is very strong in limiting this to a domain. Can this model be extended to, like, I don't know, like medical industry, digitalization, and so on? Because I agree, this is one of the hopeful, and it makes me very glad. You see, that's what I want to learn. I simply didn't know that this is happening in China also. How do those in power relate to it? Oh my God, you are really too innocent Chinese, because in my decadent mind, that's the first question that emerges. Yeah.
She works at the medical industry, and she's one of, well, I mean, she's not like ideologically saying, okay, I'm socialist, that's why I try to bring everything to something. It's just like she does it to from her conscience, and a lot of people are like that at local level.
No, maybe we should do this. Maybe we should. Sorry to interrupt you. We can speak again. Maybe we should stop with this eternal complaining about how horrible things are, and just not that look at a good sign here, a good sign there, but make a list of good signs. For example, I repeat myself, I forgot in which one of my books, but I love this example. Maybe I mentioned it here years ago. When people say you ignore empirical research, No, I don't. But because there are so interesting things there. For example, an American academic institution paid by a big corporation, because the corporation thought the result will be different, did wide research. They began in some research scientific institution itself. They took a group of people who were probably measured by those standards, not paid enough. So they gradually raised their wages and observed the result. How did it affect not only their productivity, but also their satisfaction. And they came to a wonderful result. It's not the more money you get, the more you want. No, up to a certain, not such high degree. Yes, if you were paid more, you work a little bit better and so on. But since we were dealing with a creative institution where they were inventing new things and they were workers personally engaged, isn't it a beautiful paradox, which proves, if I can put this statement in a stupid naturalist term, that socialism is not foreign to human nature against this egotist liberalism. When you reach a certain level, it becomes counterproductive because individuals then got too obsessed with money. Oh, can I earn more, even more, even more? That the quality of their work falls. Then there was an obvious leftist approach. Isn't this typical of the highly developed American society? So they did what honest researchers should do. They repeated the same experiment in some small, somewhere in the middle of India, small Indian town, in an African town, all around the result was the same. So, so it's wrong, this naive idea that, money is like a purse. You have it, you want more, and you want more and more. No, maybe you want, but it's not so simple. For the majority, you just want a relatively comfortable, don't forget about that guy. Yeah. A relatively comfortable life, and also the other example, maybe you remember it. I found it wonderful. Okay, nonetheless, I hope I'm alive because here is a good example allowed to mention Israel. In Israel, kindergarten, where you put small monsters, we call them children. I think they should. No, sorry, here, I have two sons, and for me, did you see the movie Alien? This is the best movie about what birth means, but children are monsters. Okay, but what I want to say is that they had a problem in this kindergarten. They noticed that parents are coming late. The kindergarten was open till 4, and parents said, oh, sorry, I got engaged. They come at 5, 6. So they said, we will solve this problem. We will charge parents for every hour that you are late. You will, and this gives you a little bit of a faith into the, even, I'm not afraid to say, honesty of many ordinary people. You know what was the result? More parents were even later to pick them up. Because before they had a sense of guilt. Now they said, okay, I paid, so fuck it. And they were even more late, So the first thing is, and this is how I would also perceive your co-ops and so on idea, is to drop this common perception that capitalism nonetheless fits human nature, that we are by nature egotists and, want to. No, human nature, I doubt if it exists, but like what we can abstract as human nature, I think as Freud says somewhere very nicely, we are both worse and better than we think. We are better than we think. It's obvious. For example, I quoted him here, my friend who is now from his head down vegetable, Hanif Kureishi. No? He gave me, the writer, the best lesson of Hegelian concrete universality. 5 years ago, he told me, I'm just finishing a new novel which will be totally different from the others. I told him with aggressive humor, because this was but still, the hero will have a father who will be a failed Pakistani state employee who wants to be a writer, no? Because this was in all. And you know what was his answer? But don't we all have fathers who are failed Pakistani diplomats who want to be a writer? You know, like that particular image stood for. So what his biggest shock, he wrote this in his book, whatever, he sent it to me. But he had one good conversation, how much honesty he discovered where you wouldn't expect it. He is now getting paid by NHS because he is really vegetable down from here. Now, after training, he can move hands a little bit, but not enough to press a button or eat. So he gets people who are all the time with him, 1, 2, and especially in the morning and in early evening, somebody, not always women, that's very good also, mostly even men, come to him to do the disgusting thing. You know, for him it's a problem to pee and especially to shit, you know. And it worked this time. I reacted to this with extreme vulgarity. Once I visited him and a nice lady was there who came to do this. But it's a problem with him because they have to put him on his stomach and then, you know, the disgusting story. They put a plastic, what do you put on
Glove.
that? Yeah, gloves, and then they had to excite his ass. That's the only way, no? So I told the lady, we laughed so much that, you know, like usually if you want to hurt somebody, you tell him, up yours, you are full of shit. But you have the right to tell it to him literally. You know? Okay, but what I want to say is that the shock for him was that many of these people complain how low they are paid, they don't have free time. And then he asked them, but why don't you change your job? And he got from many of them this simple reaction. But people, I don't like my job, but people depend on me. I cannot let them. And he was so surprised how many people reacted like this. So always remember this simple egotist image, you know, of we people are evil. If we are better than we think, but at the same time, we are worse. Because I agree here with Fred Gelson and Lacan, the problem is not envy. The problem is not, I want to have it. The problem is, I don't want you to have it, but I want to have it. Envy is absolutely, if there is something that we can call natural pathology in human nature, it's envy. It's envy. You know, like you prefer that the other guy loses than for both of you to win something. Sorry.
We've
But,
only got a couple of minutes left and 2 questions.
yeah, but also that guy, I feel.
We both have to.
Yeah, let's
Go
do
for it.
just this and then we can call it a day. Yeah,
Yeah.
please.
Sort of deadlock, as force goes back to 0 point. So, to resolve this crisis, look for sort of a breakthrough, right? And
You mean today's crisis, ecology, AI, everything, yeah. That's a very difficult, even philosophical question, which I think it's naive, but I am more fundamentally pessimist than it may appear. What happens when, imagine a society where people who remain like they are today are material needs are satisfied, you can lazy and so on and so on. I'm afraid what will happen. Maybe aggressivity will explode and so on, even more. I still think that this will sound horrible. I cannot go into justification, psychoanalytic, but people don't really want to be happy. I think one of the greatest stupidities of all humanity is this first line or second of the American, what was it, Constitution or Proclamation, pursuit of happiness. Isn't all human history a pursuit of unhappiness, systematic? And I think the solution is not, no, we will cure you. What brings relative happiness is what I was mentioning with the Hanif Kureishi case is, even if you don't like it, for me to be happy, you must discover some, I call this in almost religious terms, Protestant Berufung, but I'm a materialist, like you must find a vocation, which cannot be just pleasure. It's just, this is what I am here. It can be helping people. It can be being creative or whatever. It can be love, but not this satisfied love, passionate love, whatever. So for me, yesterday, Elia, is she here or she escaped again? She had that. She gave me a package of books. In it was, I don't agree with him, this guy, Nick Bostrom, or Bost, futurologist, who approaches this problem in a quite, although I don't agree with him, in a quite interesting way. She asks, what would have happened if we enter a society where with full automatization of productions, problems are solved, and what? And he is not totally stupid there. He absolutely doesn't accept the solution that is offered. It's very interesting. In my country, in parts of Germany, what is now emerging is what I called Marxist utopian Heideggerianism. The idea is that if our needs will be automatically satisfied, then we will discover new potentials in meditation, mystical experience, and so on. I doubt it. I cannot go into it now, but this point, let's focus on problems now, is not just cheap pragmatic opportunism. I don't want to dream about that. I think that the worst thing is to, but isn't this your question something for which the answer cannot be planned in advance? It has to appear as a non-intended consequence. I think this is for me the key to any notion, realistic notion of happiness. When you plan to be happy, it by definition gets happiness is Jon, that's how probably they pronounce it. We pronounce it John Elster, Norwegian rational act theorist who probably hates me, but he introduced, I like his work, a wonderful notion of states which are necessary byproducts. There are crucial states which you cannot plan them. His famous example is, for example, dignity. If I say I act with dignity, you make yourself ridiculous. Dignity must be something that, this is why I know I'm not, dignity must be something that emanates from how you act. And I think relative happiness, whatever, is the same. And I will give you, to conclude, or there is another one, wonderful example. That's for me the lesson. I forgot the author. I quote it 2 times in my book. One of really, I hope you know it, there was even a movie made, a British movie, quarter of an hour movie on it. I forgot the author. Go to Google, you find it. It's 2-3 pages story. A guy who it's called Store of the World. Does it ring a bell to you? Store of the World. It's a very simple story, as you will see, it's just a temporal trick. A guy enters some kind of psychiatrist, whatever, dealing with drugs guy, and says, is it true that if I pay you enough, you will allow me to imagine living for some time in a world which will be happiness, what I want. No? Then the guy, after some time, awakens, goes home. No, different story. Then the guy says, okay, I will see, maybe the price is too high, and takes in suburbs of London, the story takes place, takes subway, goes home to his family, and expects all the time, when will I visit the psychiatrist again, awaits it, and in waiting for that moment, his life goes on, happy events, and so on, and then he truly awakens. And we see where he really is. That all this that he thought, I go home and think about the happy moment, this was his happiness, his dream. And he awakens and it's horror. Then he gives this psychiatrist all his earthly belongings, 2 old cans of sardines, 1 small bottle of oil, and goes out and walks past in total ruins of London, and so on and so on. So you see the point. What he staged as happiness, it's not, I'm the fucking beautiful women or whatever vulgarity. It's this happy, calm, awaiting for the event. That was his happiness. It's very effective story. And again, if you go to Google or YouTube, just put Store of the World's video. It's a wonderfully done 15-minute video. So you see, this would be my lesson. Don't think at the final result as a goal. Happiness is, for me, the guy was right. This kind of happily awaiting, but we should maybe stop for this. I'm sorry, what this?
Question.
Yeah.
You again, you're there. You must be some stupid leftist, no?
Completely.
Sorry?
Yeah.
I thought so.
I guess this is a little bit related to what you're saying with the last guy about, happiness really coming from a lack of having meaning. But in some of the provided texts, you discuss the absence of a global capitalist worldview as a form of worldlessness, which you.
I follow Badiou here. Badiou developed this. I refer to him, just to make it clear.
Yeah.
Alain Badiou developed this idea, but I agree with him. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Still be used as a way of regaining local meaningful
Yeah.
concept maps and connecting
Mhm.
local worlds. And you also mentioned yesterday talking about how this paraphrasing a little bit, but neutral truth it's isolated. You can never isolate neutral truth from the context why it was mentioned, and that in this, maybe even with the current political climate, there's no big truth left. There's no uniform truth. This kind of reminded me a lot of, do you know, Giles Valley uses 1,000 plateaus?
This was I was there. I mean, when the book was written, not there, but yeah, of course, yeah. I think it's much superior than Anti-Oedipus. My big hatred is Anti-Oedipus. Mille Plateau, it goes up, yeah.
To have these decentralized plateaus that allow for local non-totalizing meaning to emerge. Do you think that model, the Dalhousian model of plateaus, help construct new situated and localized cognitive maps within the worldless capitalist frame, allowing for genuinely coexisting and like mutually irreducible local worlds.
You know what? Only the problem today is that, but nonetheless, at the operative level, we nonetheless have together to regulate somehow this worldless world. We cannot just say when there are ecological catastrophes and what I do here can be directly influenced by how you are ruining our common nature. We need, but you know where I find the truth about it? Maybe you know it. I quote it in, I forgot which one of my last books. You know where this works? I almost cried. I discovered it. You know what is my secret dream? My favorite place that I visited till now is, you know this, Britain, Svalbard Islands, halfway from North Norway to North Pole. Paradise on earth. But then I asked, what about other places? I dreamt about visiting St. Helena, where Napoleon was, because it still has once a week flights. But then I discovered the real them. You know, the smallest community living in an island, Tristan da Cunha, Cunha. It's 1,200 kilometers from the nearest inhabited island, which is St. Helena. It's no small airport. St. Helena does it, where Napoleon was kept. And it's a small island, and there are 250 and some people living there. You can visit it, but it's very complicated because only every 1 or 2 months a boat sails there, brings them something, and and then I read a report on it. It made me cry, especially the finale. Right? They live in communism, basically. They mostly do the farming, and they collectively decide, not always the same. You will do this, that, they bring all together, they distribute it, whatever. Now you will say, ha, 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 but their life would be miserable. Ha, ha, now comes the miracle. Some 15 years ago, there was an earthquake, something terribly went wrong, and the British government, formally it's in charge of that island, they brought them all to England. And for 2 years, they lived here, happy, supported by the state. And after 2 years, the situation in the island normalized. You know that almost all of them returned. Just 2 of them, or what, because of some health problems, didn't, but so they didn't know that they were happy, but in some sense they were happy. You know, they were here, state support, pornography, hardcore. What are all the pleasures of our lives? You know, aborted here, no, they returned there. So, isn't this nonetheless, again, another proof that, hey, the right localization works? The only problem is that, you know, the world is not just a group of islands like that. No, but yes, I agree. And this is also how I perceive. That's why I mentioned them yesterday. You know, this apparently crazy religious group like Amish or whatever. No, Amish don't want to. You know, they have this wonderful ritual. I forgot the name. I mentioned it in my books where, okay, they have this severe, very limited education, but then when you are in late puberty, for 2 years, you are Rumspringer, from Herumspringen, this old German. You are free to go into the, as they say, world of the Americans, whites or whatever, you know, there, and then you decide after 2 years. Okay, it's a tough decision because the rule is, if you don't come back, then they break contact with you. But you are free For 2 years, you can do again my usual stuff: hardcore, drugs, sex, everything, you know. But the mystery is that a large, okay, it depends how much there is psychological manipulation in it, but a large majority returns. They would be this type of a group for me. They don't hate the outside world because, you know, they are prohibited to have phones. No problem. Their religion permits them. If one of them has a medical emergency, you run to the neighbor who is white American, normal, Englishman, they refer to him how, and he can call it and so on. But nonetheless, there is no envy, you know. That's my utopia. I don't trust these so-called citizens of the world. Why don't I trust them? Because I am one of them, obviously, you know. Very decadent. I don't have even friends in my own town, Ljubljana. I have just family, 2 sons from previous marriages and my wife, and 3, 4 philosophers, Mladen Dolara, Lenka, Zupanc, and so on. I don't socialize there. I am at home when I'm in France, here in New York, wherever, but I don't especially enjoy it because there is something very fake, elitistic in this, you know. Sorry, maybe we should finish.
Okay.
I'm very grateful to you. I would very much like to learn, or this co-op stuff and all that. Do you have anything on paper? But do you know somebody who, you know, in the same sense that when Reagan was president, I knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who was there in the White House.
In any case, let's say thank you, especially finishing on some optimistic notes. It's unusual, right?
Thank you very much. And have a nice time. And are you decadent as me? I hate White Lotus, but I will watch next Monday who will be the killer, you know. Nonetheless, sorry, I cannot. It's that. So, thanks very much. Are you some unnatural trans beach? What are you? Yeah.
What? Oh my God, he just managed to.
No. What do you mean?
Yeah.
You know the way anti-Semites say, those are some of my best friends.
No.
Trans are some of my best friends. Thanks very much for the debate. Okay, let's go before I go. Yes. I will.
No.
I will.